Okay guys, no theatrics today, just kind of a rant. The storyline of me being stuck in my videos and the contest winners from the last contest will be announced and continued in the next video. Today though, I've got some things to get off my chest. So let's roll the intro and rip that band-aid off. So, I've noticed a bit of a trend with people, and I don't really get it. Well, I kinda get it, and I understand I'm gonna get some flack for this video, and you know what? That's fine. Recently, the Godless Iowan posted that he was going to be covering some philosophy on his channel, and he, much like I did, got some flack for that. Apparently there are some people who just vehemently hate philosophy. So I asked about that on Twitter and got a few responses. So as not to single anybody out, I am going to generalize some of the responses that I got here, as well as some of the responses that I've gotten in the past. So we'll start with the first point that people usually make: philosophy is useless. In its most basic form, philosophy is just thinking about how to think, which will never really be useless as long as you want to be consistent with yourself. If you are engaging in argumentation of any kind, you are then dealing with philosophy. How to be consistent when you're arguing, avoiding fallacious thinking, all of these things stem from philosophy. At its base form, again, philosophy is just thinking about how to think. I guarantee you've done it at least once. And if you're ever having trouble with any concept that might stem from philosophy, there are resources aplenty to research, just like with any other field of study. Logic, in its most basic form, is utilized by practically everything and everyone, and all logic is philosophical in nature. And if you think philosophy is useless on the whole, then why not study pragmatism, which is literally the philosophy of what is useful. There are so many different schools of thought you can pull from philosophy. Calling it useless is absolute nonsense. Philosophy is also the baseline that gives science its backbone and ethics. Through philosophy, you can construct methodologies and epistemologies, and the scientific method relies on a methodology to even get started. And once it's there, the scientific method can't lead you to ethics. Philosophy can. Because in science, we don't argue what morals are, we argue how they came about, whereas in philosophy, we argue about moral ethics. And if you like computers, mathematic logic is actually used in computers. Philosophy is an incredibly broad subject, and it doesn't just have to do with theist versus atheist arguments. It has a myriad of useful applications. The next issue I see people hold usually is saying that philosophy is just sophistry. Sophistry is basically the use of fallacious arguments with the intent of deceiving someone. It would then follow that a sophist would be a deceiver with a silver tongue. Now I can understand this argument against philosophy, since philosophy can be weaponized. Weaponized philosophy, especially in the theist versus atheist argument, can typically give it a bad rap. But do you know what the best defense against a sophist is? Do you know what the best way to actually counter sophistry is and be able to identify it when it's being used? Philosophy. Logic. Just as the scientific method and scientific community and peer review are used to debunk science, philosophy is used to debunk sophistry. Someone can appropriate science and use it towards their agenda and bring out pseudoscientific nonsense in the same way that a sophist can appropriate philosophy in order to suit their agenda. So while this argument is valid, it's not an argument that we don't see in literally every other field of study. If you want to see a misappropriation of science, please go look at AIG. The next issue that I've seen is that people think that philosophy means that you will be bogged down in hypotheticals and abstract thinking or arguments. This is a thing that can happen. But again, I would point to pragmatism as a way around this. Do you not like arguing about things like metaphysics? Then don't. Study another branch of philosophy. There is a never-ending conversation in philosophy that has been going on for hundreds of years. We see this with the atheist versus theist debate. But if you're decently prepared for the conversation, you can usually avoid being stuck in these hypotheticals. Another point that's brought up sometimes is that philosophical dialogue is at a dead end, and it repeats only past ideas. This might have some merit if metaethics wasn't a conversation in philosophy. And I would argue that the conversation about what is or isn't ethical is an ongoing one that the human race is going to be having until the end of time. It's not that there are dead ends in the conversation, it's that there's too many open doors. Ethics, which again is a field that we can observe in the study of philosophy, is a universally applicable field of study as long as there are sapient species to study them. As long as there are moral agents to act, the conversation about what is or isn't moral will continue. And another thing on the topic of philosophical dialogue being at a dead end, new philosophical thinkers arise yearly with new views and spins on philosophy, and while they may not be readily accepted by current philosophy buffs, they still have new ideas to bring to the table and are no less relevant for the ideas they bring. The next issue that I see people hold is that philosophy is not grounded in reality. This is an absolutely strawman-esque argument. Metaphysics isn't grounded in reality, but past that, the arguments that arise from philosophy are direct methods to be consistent within reality. If you think that philosophy is nothing more than a conversation about morals and about deities, then you don't know a whole lot about philosophy. Heck, I don't know a lot about philosophy. But if we're having a conversation about what is or isn't moral, we are engaging in a philosophical conversation that has everything to do with the reality that you and I both share. If I say one thing and then I say something else that contradicts it and you point that out, you are pointing out fallacious thinking on my part and pointing out that inconsistency is philosophical in nature and is dealing with reality in and of itself. My thinking happens within reality, and for me to be consistent in my thinking, I need to engage in philosophical conversation or argumentation whether I like it or not. And the best part is, most of the time, you're probably saying something that's philosophical in nature without ever actually realizing it. If you say, I'm an atheist, you have now said something that is philosophical in nature. If you are saying that it is morally wrong to hit a child, you are saying something that is philosophical in nature. If you are saying something that has anything to do with the fields of ethics, logic, theism, or atheism, you are engaging in philosophical conversation of one flavor or another. Get used to it and get over it. And yes, I know this is starting to seem a little ranty, but I'm feeling a little ranty, and you clicked on the video. I'm not saying that you have to like high-end philosophy. I don't like high-end philosophy. But as somebody who has hopped onto a Discord server and been slaughtered by both theist and atheist alike for my own inconsistent views, I've realized that it's much better to research these subjects and then come into the conversation after the fact if I've been beat down, than simply picking up my toys and leaving because I didn't like the nature of the conversation even though I chose to engage in it. If you can't come up with a straight answer for what you deem as knowledge, a practical way to gain knowledge, or what truth is, philosophy can help you answer those questions. And the best part? There's not going to be a universally applicable answer to all of them. I'll delve into pragmatism in another video, which is my typical philosophical stance, but I'm a pragmatist who doesn't accept the pragmatic view on truth. In pragmatism, the truth value of something directly corresponds with how useful it is. I actively reject that because my view on truth is that which comports to reality, and that where belief and truth collide, knowledge lands. That's not the typical view of truth found in pragmatism. But that's the other thing about philosophy, you can have nuance. It seems that one of the biggest issues people have is they don't like nuance. They would rather have battles of good and evil between theists and atheists. There's a lot more to it than that, and you can't paint these things as black and white. People are much more complicated than that. You cannot boil somebody down to a single word. On to more of the issues people seem to hold with philosophy. One of the issues some people have is that philosophy doesn't lead to any practical jobs. Well, first of all, jobs within the field of philosophy are highly competitive, and job prospects aren't certain even for PhD students, but they do exist. A philosophy major will help you get into any job involving the humanities, research, and philosophical credentials can be used if you would like to be a public intellectual who is a published author. Now, I don't have a PhD in philosophy. I don't have a PhD in anything, so that wouldn't be a route that I'm taking. But the point is, the claim that philosophy cannot lead to any practical jobs is just bunk. It's like saying that being an artist won't lead to any jobs. Yes, it can. It's just hard. And if you think life boils down to what can or can't be applicable in a job, then you might have lost sight of what life means. To me, life isn't just about the job or survival. Life is about living and experience. And if philosophy isn't useful because it isn't applicable to a job, even if that were true, I would say who the hell cares? I play trading card games and they're not generally applicable to any job I've ever held. It doesn't make the games any less useful, it just makes them not applicable to a certain field. Another issue people seem to have is that philosophy is nothing but jargon. And you know what? You're half right. Philosophical conversation does have its jargon, but being lost listening to all that jargon is no different than being lost listening to two biologists talk about evolution. If you don't fully understand the mechanisms involved in the conversation, that does not illegitimize the conversation, and it does not make the two people having that conversation intellectually elitist. Just as if two people were talking about their favorite video game, and you've never played it before, so it's all Greek to you. The people having this conversation are not suddenly intellectually elitist. This leads to the next and last point that I'll be responding to in this video, that philosophy is nothing but mental masturbation. I have two responses to this. I have the practical response, which is, look at every other point I've made in this video, and please try saying that again. If you still feel this way, I'm sorry, but I can't really help you. My job isn't to change your mind. My job is to just give you my perspective. If you don't like it, we don't have to agree. The snarky comment that I would make to this is that reading a book is mental masturbation. If it is, who cares? Even though it isn't. As I said earlier in the video, philosophy is useful as a baseline for a myriad of studies. Mathematical logic can be applied into, obviously, mathematics. Philosophical methodology can be applied directly to the sciences, and the ethics found in philosophy can be used as the checks and balance as we study the world. If somebody is being entirely irrational, typically you would be using philosophy as a method of deconstructing why they're irrational. It would also help articulate why they're irrational as well. So you know what? If you honestly still hate philosophy and don't find it useful in any way, shape, or form, then that's fine. You don't have to, and you can let me know why in the comments section below. But if you've made it this far into the video and you don't think philosophy is useful still, you've probably already written out your comment, haven't you? In the meantime, I'll be looking forward to the philosophical conversations that the Godless Iowan will be having on his channel, and for those of you who enjoy it, I hope you'll be looking forward to the ones that I plan on having on mine. Oh, and one final note. When someone says that they love the theist versus atheist debate, but they hate philosophy, it sounds no different to me than when Kent Hovind says that he's a young Earth creationist, but he loves science. It's a complete and total contradiction, and you know how we evaluate contradictions in logical thought? Philosophy.